Okay, so we need to talk about energy. And I don't mean the I just need a second cup of coffee kind of
No,
energy.
not at all.
I'm talking about the fundamental biological currency that actually keeps you alive.
Right.
Because when you look at the way people talk about chronic fatigue syndrome or ME/CFS, it's also surface level. It's always fatigue, brain fog, the frustration.
Which is strange because the plumbing, so to speak, is where the real story is. If you
Yeah.
just strip away all the stigma and the psychological framing that has, let's be honest, has plagued this field for
Well,
decades,
Jax.
you are left with a very stark, very mechanical reality.
Exactly. And that is the mission for this deep dive. We are unpacking Dr. Corina Ianculovici's guide on mitochondrial restoration. And I want to be really clear up front, this is not a lifestyle piece about getting more sleep.
No.
This is an analysis of a systems level failure. We're going to look at why the body's battery just stands holding a charge, and we're going to focus on this fascinating and frankly terrifying connection between the gut and the mitochondria.
It's the gut mitochondria axis.
Hmm.
And it effectively reframes the whole thing. It takes ME/CFS from being some kind of mysterious syndrome into a cellular energy
A
crisis.
crisis, yeah.
The core argument in the source material is that this is not a software problem. It's not all in your head. It is a hardware problem. The actual machinery that produces ATP adenosine triphosphate has been physically damaged.
Okay, so let's start there. Let's start in the engine room. The source says the trigger for a huge number of these cases is a viral insult, like
Mhm.
Epstein-Barr, COVID, things like that. But, I mean, lots of people get those viruses and they bounce back. So what's the specific mechanism here? Why does the damage stick?
It all comes down to where the damage happens. The virus doesn't just make you sick for a week. In these cases, it seems to attack the inner mitochondrial membrane.
Ah, okay.
And that is critical because that membrane is where the electron transport chain, the ETC, lives. You can think of the ETC as a series of protein complexes, complex I through V, that pass electrons along, almost like a bucket brigade, to generate power.
Right, like an assembly line.
The source specifically points to major dysfunction in complex On and complex 3,
Just those two.
primarily those two.
Yeah.
So if those two stations on the assembly line are damaged, either by the virus or the stress it causes, the electrons just can't move down the chain efficiently.
And if the electrons don't move, you don't build up the pressure you need to spin the turbine at the end.
Precisely. That pressure is the proton gradient.
Hmm.
Without a functional gradient, the turbine, which is the ATP synthase, it can't spin. So you end up in a situation where all the raw materials, the food and the oxygen, are there.
But the engine can't convert them. It's a structural failure.
A structural failure of energy conversion. Exactly.
And that failure leads to this staggering statistic in the text. ATP production in these patients can drop by roughly 60%.
60%.
That's not a low battery warning. That's a citywide brownout.
It is. And, to play devil's advocate for a second, you might ask, well, if energy is down 60%, why aren't these patients in organ failure? Why are they just tired?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And the answer is prioritization. The body is incredibly smart. It shunts that limited 40% of energy to the absolute essentials. The heart, the lungs, the brainstem,
The survival function.
the survival function, everything else. Higher cognition, muscle recovery, digestion, all of that get throttled way, way down.
Okay, that brings us to what you called the death spiral. I found this part of the research just insidious. It explains why you can't just rest your way out of this. It has to do with a molecule called NAD plus A.
The NAD plus loop.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is absolutely crucial for understanding why the disease becomes chronic.
So what is NAD plus?
NAD plus is basically an electron carrier. It's the little worker that picks up an electron from your food and runs it over the assembly line. But here's the biochemical catch-22.
Okay.
You need ATP to recycle NAD plus phloem.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. If your mitochondria are broken, you have low ATP. If you have low ATP, you can't recycle your NAD plus phloem. And if you run out of NAD plus phloem,
You can't transport electrons to the mitochondria to make ATP. So the engine stalls, but the starter motor is also dead because the battery is dead.
it is a self-perpetuating energy failure loop. The body isn't just fatigued. It is chemically locked in a low energy state.
Hmm.
And the work from Dr. Ianculovici suggests that unless you intervene in this specific loop, the body simply doesn't have the kinetic potential to restart the system on its own.
Wow. And this is where the plot really thickens. So we've established the engine is broken, but the source argues that the thing keeping it broken, the thing that's preventing the repair crew from even getting in there, is actually coming from the digestive system.
This is the amplifier.
Yeah.
Hippocrates said, all disease begins in the gut. Usually sounds like a cliche.
Right.
But in this context, it's a metabolic reality.
The text really emphasizes the energy cost of the gut. I think we all underestimate this. We just think digestion sort of happens.
We do, but the epithelial cells, the actual lining of your gut, are some of the most energy-demanding cells in the entire body. They have a massive turnover rate. They replace themselves every few days.
And that regeneration must be incredibly expensive, ATT-wise.
Incredibly expensive. So if we go back to our math, if your total ATP is down 60%,
The gut can't pay its energy bill.
it can't. The cells stop regenerating efficiently. And the tight junctions, you can think of them as the mortar between the bricks of your gut wall, they start to crumble.
And that is the mechanical cause of intestinal permeability or leaky gut.
Exactly. It's not necessarily caused by something you ate. It's caused by the energy famine in the gut wall itself.
So once that wall is breached, what happens then?
Well, the contents of the gut bacterial byproducts, things called lipopolysaccharides or LPS, endotoxins, they start to leak into the bloodstream.
And these are things that should never, ever be in the bloodstream.
Never. So the immune system sees these endotoxins floating around in the blood, and it just goes nuclear.
It creates what the text calls nuclear-level inflammation.
It does. And here's the real kicker, that inflammation is actively toxic to mitochondria. It suppresses complex even further.
Oh, wow. So the gut isn't just a victim of the energy crisis. It becomes the enforcer.
That's a great way to put it.
The mitochondria fail, so ATP drops. The gut lining breaks because of the low ATP. Then toxins leak out, which causes inflammation, which then makes the mitochondria fail even worse.
It is a vicious, vicious cycle.
Right.
And you cannot fix the energy production if the gut is constantly pouring sand into the gas tank.
This context really, really sets the stage for the most defining and I think the most misunderstood symptom of MECFS, post-exertional malaise.
PA. PM is the hallmark. It's what separates this from just being depressed or out of shape.
The source describes it as this disproportionate crash after any kind of exertion, physical or even cognitive. But the detail that always trips people up is the delay.
The lag, yeah.
A patient might go to a wedding or even just have a long conversation and they feel okay in the moment. But then maybe 6 hours, maybe 24 hours later, they can't lift their head off the pillow. Why the lag?
To understand the lag, you have to understand the fuel source. In a healthy person, when your energy demand goes up, your mitochondria ramp up aerobic respiration using oxygen to make clean, efficient energy.
Okay.
MECFS patients have zero reserve capacity. Their aerobic ceiling is basically the floor.
So as soon as they exert themselves, even a tiny bit, they immediately cross the anaerobic threshold.
Immediately. They switch to burning dirty fuel. Anaerobic metabolism keeps you moving for a short time, but it produces lactate and, more importantly, a flood of reactive oxygen species, ROS.
Free radicals.
Yes, free radicals, little molecular wrecking balls.
And they're just causing oxidative stress everywhere.
Exactly. Now, why the delay? It's because the accumulation of all those ROS molecules triggers a whole biological cascade. It's not just muscle soreness. These ROS molecules go on a rampage, attacking cell membranes, and specifically the very mitochondrial membranes that are already compromised.
So it takes time for that damage to add up.
It takes hours for that chemical reaction to peak and for the resulting inflammation to completely shut the system down.
The source used a phrase that just stuck with me. Biochemical inevitability.
It's a powerful phrase, isn't it?
It is, because it removes the whole willpower variable from the equation. It's like saying, if you pour sugar in a gas tank, the car will stop. It doesn't matter how much the car wants to keep driving.
And the damage is cumulative. The text is very clear that the mitochondria are often more damaged after the crash than they were before it started. So every time a patient pushes through and triggers PEM, they aren't just getting tired. They're actively degrading their own hardware.
Which brings us to the immune trap. We touched on inflammation with the gut, but this seems broader. The source says the immune system gets stuck in the on position. How does the PEM crash feed into that?
Well, think about what those reactive oxygen species are doing. They're damaging cells. When cells get damaged, they release debris.
Right.
The immune system detects that debris and interprets it as a threat, almost like a virus. So every single time you crash, you are effectively re-triggering an immune response against yourself.
But the immune system also needs a ton of energy to function properly.
That's the standoff. Immune cells are energy hogs. When they're active, they demand huge amounts of ATP to produce cytokines and hunt down pathogens. But in ME/CFS, there is no ATP to spare.
So it gets stuck?
It becomes dysfunctional. It's overactive in terms of pumping out inflammation, the cytokines, but it's underactive in terms of actually clearing the original virus or the new debris.
It's just spinning its wheels.
Exactly. And while it's spinning its wheels, it's stealing what little energy is left from the brain and the muscles, and the inflammation it's creating is further blocking the mitochondria. It's the chronic inflammatory mitochondrial failure loop. The body is at war with itself, fighting a phantom enemy with no supply line.
Okay, so we've painted a fairly bleak picture here. We've got broken engines, leaky walls, toxic blood, a confused immune system. But the guide is called mitochondrial restoration. It implies there's a way out.
There is, but it requires a very specific, very deliberate order of operations. You can't just throw supplements at the problem and hope something sticks.
The roadmap. Let's walk through it. Step 1 isn't exercise. It isn't even mitochondrial support. It's repair the gut barrier.
It has to be. You have to shut down the amplifier. If you try to fix the mitochondria while the gut is still leaking endotoxins into the blood, you are just bailing water out of a sinking boat without plugging the hole.
You have to seal the tight junctions first.
You have to lower that systemic inflammation. That's job one.
Okay, so the leak is plugged. Then step 2 is restore mitochondrial membrane integrity.
Right. This involves using very specific lipids to physically patch the holes in the structure of the mitochondria. You're literally fixing the casing of the engine before you try to start it.
Then step 3, rebuild the electron transport chain.
This is where you actually try to get complex I and complex 3 working again, usually with specific cofactors and nutrients that support that electron flow. You're unsticking the conveyor belt.
And only then, only after all that, do we get to step 4, restore NAD plus recycling.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can't put fuel, the NAD plus, over into a broken engine. But once the structure is stable and the chain is moving, you have to restart that recycling loop to get the starter motor turning again.
And finally, step 5, calm the immune system.
Which should start to happen naturally as the gut heals and the energy comes back online. But yes, there are ways to actively support that. But there's a kind of step 0 that underpins all of this.
Pacing.
Radical pacing. The source is absolutely adamant about this. You must stay within your energy envelope. If you push and trigger PEM, you generate all those ROS, and you basically blow up the construction site you're trying to rebuild.
It's interesting because pacing is so often heard by patients as give up on life. But in this context, it's actually an active medical intervention. It's stop doing damage so the repair crew can work.
Exactly right. It shifts the whole philosophy from management, which often just implies dealing with symptoms, to true restoration. The goal isn't to live better with fatigue. The goal is to rebuild the cellular capacity to produce energy again.
It's a message of biological hope, not just psychological coping.
And that distinction matters so much. When you finally understand the mechanics, the electron transport chain, the gut permeability, the ROS cascade, the symptoms stop looking like a list of random complaints.
They start to look like the logical, predictable outcome of a system in failure.
Exactly.
It really challenges the way we view capacity in general, doesn't it? We tend to moralize energy. We think of drive or ambition as a character trait.
We do. We praise people for having a great motor.
But when you look at this research, you realize that motor is literal. It's biochemical. If my complex I is firing efficiently and my NAD plus is recycling fast, I look like a go-getter. If those things break, I look lazy.
It suggests that what we call personality or willpower is far more dependent on microscopic biochemistry than we are probably comfortable admitting.
It's a really humbling thought. If our potential, our drive, is dictated by the thickness of our gut lining and the flow of electrons, maybe we should all be a little less judgmental of people who can't keep up.
I think that's the ultimate takeaway here. Understanding the biology really forces us to rethink the sociology.
Well, that is a lot to digest, pun fully intended. This deep dive has definitely rewired how I think about fatigue. A huge thanks to Dr. Ianculovici's research, and thank you for helping us unpack it all.
My pleasure. It's a complex topic, but a really vital one.
Stick around for our next deep dive. But until then, protect your mitochondria. And thanks for listening.